Hello and welcome to this video where we will explore what could happen if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS and how this could potentially trigger a currency war. First, let's start by defining what BRICS is. BRICS is a group of 5 emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries are collectively known as BRICS, and they represent a significant portion of the world's population, GDP, and trade. Now, what would happen if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS? Well, this would certainly have significant implications for the global economy and the geopolitical landscape. Saudi Arabia is currently the world's largest oil exporter, and its economy is heavily reliant on oil revenues. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, it would bring a significant amount of oil resources to the table, which would make the group even more influential in the global energy market. Here are some possible ways the world could respond if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS. 1. The global energy market would shift. Saudi Arabia joining BRICS would give the group even more control over the global energy market. This could result in higher energy prices, as BRICS would have even more power to influence the supply and demand of oil. 2. The US dollar could lose its status as the world's reserve currency. If BRICS becomes more influential in the global economy, countries may start to shift away from the US dollar and towards other currencies. This could weaken the US dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, and potentially lead to a currency war. 3. Saudi Arabia's relations with the US could be strained. The US and Saudi Arabia have traditionally had close ties, but if Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could create tension between the two countries. 4. The geopolitical landscape could shift. Saudi Arabia is a major player in the Middle East, and its alliance with BRICS could potentially shift the balance of power in the region. 5. The global balance of power could shift. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this would give the group even more power and influence in the global economy. This could potentially shift the balance of power away from the West and towards the East. 6. The global economy could become more multipolar. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this would further strengthen the group's position as a counterbalance to the West. This could lead to a more multipolar global economy, with multiple centers of economic power. 7. Saudi Arabia's oil reserves could be used as a bargaining chip. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, its oil reserves could be used as a bargaining chip in negotiations with other countries. 8. The global energy market could become more volatile. If BRICS were to have even more control over the global energy market, this could potentially lead to more volatility and instability. 9. Saudi Arabia's economy could become more diversified. Joining BRICS could encourage Saudi Arabia to diversify its economy away from oil and towards other sectors. 10. Saudi Arabia's relations with other Middle Eastern countries could be affected. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially strain its relationships with other Middle Eastern countries that are aligned with the West. 11. The US could potentially impose sanctions on Saudi Arabia. If the US feels threatened by Saudi Arabia's alignment with BRICS, it could potentially impose sanctions on the country. 12. The global political landscape could shift. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially shift the global political landscape towards the east. 13. Other countries could potentially join BRICS. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially encourage other countries to join as well. 14. Saudi Arabia could potentially use its influence to promote Islamic finance. Saudi Arabia is a major player in the Islamic finance industry, and its alignment with BRICS could potentially lead to greater promotion and adoption of Islamic finance globally. 15. BRICS could potentially challenge the dominance of the IMF and World Bank. If BRICS were to become even more influential in the global economy, they could potentially challenge the dominance of the IMF and World Bank, which have traditionally been dominated by Western countries. 16. Saudi Arabia's relations with Iran could be affected. Iran is currently aligned with Russia and China, and if Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially strain its relationships with Iran. 17. The global trade landscape could shift. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially lead to a shift in the global trade landscape, with more countries potentially turning towards the East for trade. 18. Saudi Arabia's human rights record could come under greater scrutiny. Joining BRICS could potentially lead to greater scrutiny of Saudi Arabia's human rights record, particularly if other BRICS countries are more vocal about human rights issues. 19. Saudi Arabia could potentially become a more influential player in global affairs. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this would give it a greater voice in global affairs, particularly on issues that are important to the group. 20. The U.S. could potentially increase its military presence in the Middle East. If the U.S. feels threatened by Saudi Arabia's alignment with BRICS, it could potentially increase its military presence in the Middle East to counterbalance the group's influence. Now, let's talk about how this could potentially lead to a currency war. A currency war is a situation where countries compete to devalue their currencies in order to gain a competitive advantage in trade. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, this could potentially lead to a currency war with the US and other Western countries. One way this could happen is if BRICS were to move away from using the US dollar as the primary currency for international trade. If this were to happen, it could weaken the US dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, which could potentially trigger a currency war. Additionally, if BRICS were to become more influential in the global economy, countries may start to shift away from the US dollar and towards other currencies, which could also potentially lead to a currency war. In conclusion, if Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, it would have significant implications for the global economy and the geopolitical landscape. The world would respond in a variety of ways, and it could potentially trigger a currency war. However, it is important to note that this is all speculation and it remains to be seen if Saudi Arabia will actually join BRICS. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video informative. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell so you can be notified when we release future content.